As we go live with Rachael Mortimer. Rachael, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us on BHN. Big Hairy News. Hi, and how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I understand you're a bit nervous, and I understand why, because what we're talking about tonight is certainly a divisive topic, just for yourself and for your colleagues and people who are kind of on in your side of this conversation. I have also got a shit ton of kickback about having this conversation tonight. So we're sort of in the same park with being a bit nervous about having this conversation, which on one level I kind of understand, because I think as much as we can, we always want to be accurate and fair and balanced. But on the other side of it, I think pretty much we should be able to talk about almost anything, anytime, anywhere we want. So thanks for joining us.
No problem. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and I think for me, just to set this up, and we'll set it up before we get into it, let a few people join on, but I can see people jumping in right now. I think for me, I like to talk about issues that the public sphere is talking about, the marketplace is talking about. People often say to me, well, is there anything you wouldn't talk about? And I often say, I can't imagine doing a conversation on the benefits of teen suicide. And one of the reasons I can't imagine doing that conversation is, well, it's disgusting, but it's also, no one's talking about that. It's not in the public sphere. It's not a conversation happening around water coolers. This is. So I'm happy to talk about it. In fact, this week we're doing a debate this week on hate speech because of the legislation going in. Some people are saying we shouldn't be talking about it because it brings up the chance for people to, I guess, attempt to get away with racism. Before Christmas, we're having a debate on the birth certificate bill. People say we shouldn't be doing that because it's no one's business, but it's being talked about in the public square. So I think it's completely valid, okay, and fine for us to talk about it. So that's why we're here, and thank you for joining us.
Well,
now let's start at the very, very beginning, as Maria said on The Sound of Music. Very good place to start, I think is what she said. I read an article on youandstuff.co.nz that started off by saying you're a school teacher of 15 years, you're refusing to get the COVID-19 jab, a head of English and social sciences, and it means that you are, we're going to get into this in detail, you know more than me, but I understand it means that you are going to lose your job due to the mandate because you're refusing to have the vaccine. Is that the case? Have I got that correct so far?
Yeah, no, you've got that 100% correct.
And you guys were in court last week. You were pushing to have this, thrown out, overruled?
We were in court just to argue the legalities of the human rights, like the actual whether the Bill of Rights was constituted this, because in our opinion it doesn't. It was mostly the midwives that were in there for the Monday, but there was also the NZD SOS and then the NZT SOS, which we were looking at just how this is going to potentially. There's a lot of people involved, like there's hundreds and hundreds of people involved. It's not just me. I was lucky enough to reply to a news article about these mandates coming in, and I was just in so much shock and so much befuddlement, really, that the government was going to go as far as what they were going to do. That's when I contacted this particular reporter and said, look, I want to speak out. I mean, I'm sure you've got dozens of people speaking out, but and so I just got lucky and he decided to do my story.
So people know where I'm sitting on this thing. I'm double vaccinated. My kids are vaccinated. I don't have a problem in general with the mandate. So that's where I'm coming from, but that doesn't mean I don't want to understand why, because someone did say to me the other day, and I think it's a valid point, that if 30 kids in a classroom don't need to be vaccinated, why do teachers need to be vaccinated? And I thought, well, that's, if nothing else, that's a fair talking point. Now, when it comes to elderly healthcare or in the medical fraternity, I think it's far more black and white to me. Do you have the same opinion for someone, say, working in a retirement complex or in a hospital, or is this specifically about you as a teacher and the teaching profession?
I personally think that it should be covering everybody, because it's not just going to be teachers, it's not going to be just doctors and nurses and midwives. It's going to hit all sectors of this country. And in my mind, the government hasn't actually been very clear about a lot of the stuff that they're telling us to do. For instance, suddenly I'm quite astounded that I can go to school up until tomorrow and I can be surrounded by children and I can be surrounded by my work colleagues, and I have kids in the room with me doing tutorials and learning, and it's all great. And then suddenly from tomorrow at midnight, I become a biological weapon and a threat against them, and I'm not allowed to be on site anymore. And so
But what would have been consistent? What, you should have been kicked out of the door straight away? I mean, surely they have to put a date on it that says if you're not vaccinated by this date, then this is the thing. I mean, surely there's got to be an arbitrary date, and it is arbitrary at some stage, though, doesn't there?
Yeah, but the thing that's really interesting is that studies from overseas say that the children in particular are at this very less chance of them actually getting very sick from COVID. I think I was reading an article today from America that said only about 400 children in America, which is a big place, actually died from COVID. And a lot of them did end up getting COVID, but their symptoms were quite, they were just very much cold and flu type symptoms. I just find it interesting because over the last lockdown and the previous lockdown, the very first and second lockdown, we were told that schools were safe, and actually it had very low transmission rates. And Bloomfield himself went on national TV and said, oh no, going back to school in level 3 is perfectly fine, and going back to school in level 2 is perfectly fine. And for the last term and a half since we've come back from that second lockdown, we have not had to wear masks. We have not really had to do much self-distancing. We sanitize the students' hands and we try and keep back from them. But suddenly on this date, we are no longer allowed to be in there. It's just quite remarkable.
You do accept, though, with I guess part of this conversation for me feels hypothetical, and part feels very real, because I want to ask you a question that you may disagree with the premise around COVID, but I was going to say you do accept, though, that when a different variant comes out, the rules that were applied to the previous one may not be applied to this one. So, for example, we've all got different rules in the level 3 that we didn't have in the level 3 last year because Delta is different from what came in the past. So I'm sure you do accept that things can change. It doesn't mean that the previous iteration was wrong and this one's wrong. In theory, it means that different horses for different courses because it's a different situation being set up.
Yeah, and saying that, it's quite interesting that you're going about the different variants, considering, and I'm not a medical person. I'm not going to sit there and argue the medical side of this, because there is a lot of research out there and a lot of different things. So I don't see the point in arguing that particular point tonight, but I just find it very interesting that they're talking about the different variants, and the shot that we are supposed to be getting is still from the initial variant. So the COVID Pfizer jab, it hasn't changed. It's still for the original COVID strain, and yet people have gone mad saying that we have to protect people from the Delta variant, and yet we're still getting the same shot. And if you look at flu vaccines, for instance, we have different variants of flu vaccines that are made up for the different strains. And every year they try and make sure that it's the right strain before they actually give the injection, but they're not 100% sure. So how come we are still getting the original COVID shot from when it's actually the Delta variant as everyone's so worried about?
I don't think that's accurate. And look, I also am not a medical person, but I know that I'm someone who gets flu jabs, and I'm always told it will cover all the flus up until the new iteration this year, because they can't do the one from this year because it hasn't come out yet. And I remember in the news headlines them talking about exactly what you're saying, that this was the vaccine that was developed under COVID-19, not Delta, but that they found out that it was still successful in protecting from Delta. And I don't have a ton of research, because really what I'm doing here tonight is looking for your story as well. I mean, so delving into the numbers, and even though I'm happy to do that, but when we look at the ones that were in hospital in New Zealand, at some stage there was something like 150 people in hospital, 3 of which were fully vaccinated, the rest weren't. That seems to me, I don't know if you accept those numbers or not, but that seems to me to be pretty indicative that this is still protecting from Delta, even though it was developed for the previous iteration.
See, the problem is that we are getting very interesting and different information from a lot of different sources. And even if as I said, I don't want to go into the medical side of it because I'm sure somebody's going to come on and go, oh, you don't know your medical side, you need to be quiet. I'm just going to take it from my point of view, which is literally from, a humanities teacher. I've taught this sort of thing. I've taught about governments, and I've taught about human rights for as long as I can remember teaching. And the thing that is really, really disturbing for me is that the media stuff that we are getting, like currently, is very one-sided, which is why I agreed to come on here, because surely people, I don't understand it, surely people, even if you agree or disagree with this vax, so regardless of jab or no jab, surely there are people whose little radars are going off when we have the leader of our country standing up and saying on national TV a couple of things. And the first thing that really raises my hackles is when she said, I think at one point in a press release, she said the only information that you can trust is from us in the government, and anything else is misinformation.
Okay, hang on a sec. Are you talking about when she said the one source of truth? Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yep.
Do you? So this is my question to you. Do you know the context of that?
I remember watching. Yeah, I do remember because there were people talking about all the different misinformation online and where they were getting it from. There are so many rabbit holes out there, but then to say that we can only listen to what the government has to say and what the government is putting out is a little bit concerning.
But what I asked, what I'm trying to get from you, because this is what I want to know, is where your information's come from and why you believe what you believe. And I'm not looking to challenge you in any way at all. No, you're entitled to your own opinion. But when I say, do you know the context of that conversation? Because I saw someone put that comment in about 2 weeks ago, like as in, look, the government thinks they know everything. Look how much they've gotten wrong. The context of that, because I looked it up when I saw that, was it was about a week into the COVID outbreak last year. It was about 1 week in. So literally it was March of last year. And what the Prime Minister was saying is, look, this is a fast moving thing, but at the moment we've got the best information that anyone needs to know right now. And I think it's fair to say, that that information 1 or 2 weeks into a pandemic, into the first lockdown, it doesn't come across to me at least as tyrannical. These people think they know it all. No one else knows anything. Now, if they said that today, I think it would be a fair point. But what I've seen happen is people put out that meme today, but it was actually from March of last year when nobody knew what was going on. So the government was saying, we don't know everything yet, but come to us for the best, most up-to-date information. I find that fair. With that context, do you find any difference with that comment?
I would have to actually research that myself, just to double check that, just as I said.
That's what we're here to do. I'll bring it up for you. You can keep talking, and I'll bring up for you when she said that.
Yep, no, that sounds good.
Yep.
So another thing with that is the fact that we go on about COVID deaths, and one thing that we need to be looking at, I think, is safety of this vaccine. And when you look at the government's own website of MedSafe, in the last wee while, every week we seem to be having more and more summary of deaths that have been reported from this vaccine, which at the current total, I think, as of the 23rd of October, was something like 94 deaths that were reported. And of course, 41, they say, oh, it's unlikely related, or maybe it is, or there's insufficient information, maybe there is. It's just very interesting that even when you look at the government's websites, especially when you look at the data that is being reported, the safety of this experimental vaccine is a little bit questionable. And when you look overseas, the same thing's happening.
Why do you think it's experimental?
Because it actually hasn't been fully, where is it? It hasn't actually fully, the trial is actually still not to end. It hasn't ended yet. It doesn't end until 2023 at the end of that year. And it's actually saying that on their website. So I think in November or December of 2023 is when the clinical trial of it actually finishes.
Back onto that question we just had. Now, I haven't found the exact
Yep.
article, but I found a blog about the article, which says very clearly of the dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. Right? That's the comment there. That was made at a press conference on March the 20th, 2020. So that was made March 20th of 2020. That comment. I think we had only been in lockdown for a couple of weeks. So I think this is the and I'll call that misinformation. They did say it, but I think using it today to talk about what's happening today, because there are, I guess, some people out there who are saying there is interesting information from other sources, but 3 weeks in or 2 weeks into a brand new pandemic, I think that's fair. Does it change your mind at all about that?
Probably not with a lot of the other information and stuff that's come out, because like even the latest stuff, I think there was a newspaper article or a TV article about the gunshot. So the person that died from a gunshot who is now being classed as a COVID death. So, or I think in the last couple of weeks they were mentioning on stuff the fact that 100.8% of 100.8% of Asians in New Zealand had been fully vaccinated or partially vaccinated. So some of the stats that we are getting, I think we have to have a wee look at it and question it. Regardless of the stats, we have to look worldwide at some of the other studies that are out there. And I think the problem is when you end up having a prime minister stand up on the public forum and say some of the stuff that she is saying, it ends up leading to all sorts of people, like people just kind of running with it and saying totally wholeheartedly. So since if that was the 2020 when she said we should only listen to that information, we're in 2021 now. I have people say to me, I have family members, I have friends who disagree with me who say, oh, well, you're just not reading the right stuff and you're obviously not following what the government said, which is where we have to listen to what they are putting out and only what they're saying. So even though that comment was done a year ago, it still holds a lot of power because Jacinda has had a lot of power in this country and she is a very recognizable figure. And so what she says does filter down to the masses, and this is what they believe wholeheartedly. Whether it was yesterday or today, it still is very much apparent that for a lot of people, they're only willing to look at what the stats that the government are giving out. They have not gone looking at other information.
When you say, like you're intimating that the conversation from the top, from the Prime Minister's office is ongoing and has been a similar vein to that, basically what I hear you saying all the way through. What else can you, look, I'm not, first of all, I'm not saying that there's not. What else can you point to that they've said that's been
a little bit inflammatory?
Say again?
A little bit inflammatory. Probably about 2 weeks.
That's so much of a concern that would bring concern to. Let me say, the death from the person who was shot, who's been classed as a COVID death. I mean, that's ridiculous. I think that's why he was shot to death, and he had COVID, didn't die of COVID. I don't know why that was in there either, but it doesn't mean I then throw my hands up and go, well, it's all bullshit, you know?
Yeah, no. I get that, but it's really interesting that they're saying that, and other little things like that. You have to question a little bit what is actually going on. I question the fact that our Prime Minister is sitting there and saying that she's okay with bringing in two classes of society. I question.
She didn't say she was okay. She said it's what's happening.
Yeah, but she didn't look particularly upset about it. There was very much, you're probably saying to me that I'm reading too much into it, but she didn't exactly sound very disappointed with the fact that there are going to be two classes of society. The problem is that all the way through this COVID pandemic, we have had a lot of information given to us, and people are scared, and I get that. A lot of people are scared, and we've had lots of stuff. There is high anxiety everywhere. I have kids who are very anxious because of all these lockdowns and everything going on in the world. But then the goalpost keeps on moving. The government comes out with one set of rules and then turns around and it's a completely other set of rules, or they change something very, very quickly or backtrack on something. And to me, that's not actually a very trustworthy government where we don't know whether we're coming or going. So, for example, and if you want an example, is the fact that when this mandate came out, they said that we could get medical exemptions. They said that we would be able to apply for medical exemptions. And so people who have medical conditions went, phew, I might actually be okay. I might be able to have a little bit of a breather. I might be able to go and actually get a medical exemption because I don't think that this vaccine is safe for me due to the medical conditions I have. And then they went out and they got medical exemptions, and then boom, just before our court case on the Friday night, oh, sorry, no, they've all been like, no, they're not actually, people have bullied people into exemptions, so they're all null and void. You now have to go back to your doctor. You now have to have him send something up to the Minister of Health, who then has to accept it before that's even allowed. And even then, it's only a temporary exemption. So the goalpost for everybody, for Auckland, for just everything, it seems to be constantly moving.
Sure. Now, look, as I said before, it depends where you sit on this. And I see someone off this camera or handing you notes or something like that. But I think it's disingenuous, in my opinion, to expect a new disease that's come into the country, into the world, to have exactly the same thing done on day one as day 100 or day 350. So to say that I heard someone say about science the other day that science is, what did they say? They say something like it's the least bad amount of knowledge we have today, meaning it still might not be perfect, but it's as close to that as we have today. And then tomorrow it changes because something else gets discovered, or I'm not talking specifically about the vaccine, but something else gets discovered, or something else gets known, or there's a new discovery, or there's a double-blind test that shows something else, and then science changes and it changes and it changes. I mean, following the idea that the government has changed so many times, that doesn't sound very good. Following that to its nth degree, we'd still be living in the dark ages and using leeches. But we've changed and we've changed and we've changed and we've changed and we've changed. And this is changing so quickly, I think, which is a part of it. But what I thought I wanted to do as well, because what I'm very careful not to do, and please, I'm not saying you're saying this, is misquote or give wrong, like I don't like paraphrases, which is why when I said to you, that's not exactly what she said. So what I thought I would do, just for everyone to know, is bring up what are the exemptions from the mandatory vaccination. And then people can know what they are, because there are some still, you can get them. And then maybe we can speak to this. Although the other thing is we haven't really talked a lot about your personal thoughts, which I want to get to. So why don't we just do this, what the exemptions are, and then get to your personal choices and why that's actually there. So it says exemptions from mandatory vaccination. In some situations, health and disability education and corrections workers may be able to get exemptions from being vaccinated against COVID-19. However, there are very few situations where vaccination is contradicted. And as such, a medical exemption is expected to be really required. Exemptions will be limited to situations where a suitable alternative to the COVID-19 vaccine is not readily available for the individual. Exemptions will be for a specified time, reflecting, for example, recovery from clinical conditions of the availability of alternate vaccines. I think that speaks to, I think there was a mayor on the West Coast who was saying they wanted to wait for the, whatever the other, is it the Moderna? There's another vaccine. But in saying that, when that mayor was asked question by the reporter, are you saying you guarantee you'll then take that one? She still said no. So I wonder if sometimes that was a bit of a, let's just put this on the too hard shelf until next week, but I don't know if it is. So there are exemptions. It is in the rules. It is on the page that's at the health.govt.nz. What's the problem?
I think there's maybe 100. I think they said maybe 100 people in all of New Zealand could actually get an exemption. It's a very narrow one. So even if the person... Sorry.
But what's the problem with that? What's the problem with there only being very few? Because the medical exemption, based to me, says should be for people who absolutely, for their own safety, for their own whatever it is, cannot take it, which would be a very few number of people, I would think. But
well, the problem with that is, and this is the problem is that because this is an experimental vaccine, we do not know. This has been you cannot tell me this vaccine has been around for dozens of years, where we actually know the outcome of how people are going to react to it. And if you look at the safety data on MedSafe and the number of deaths which potentially outweigh the number of COVID deaths, you have to wonder just how safe this vaccine is. Now, there are reports all over the world where there are different countries which are starting to query the safety of this. I think Taiwan yesterday may have actually stated that they were halting, or they were putting a pause between a specific age group due to the heart problems that was happening to young men. And that's not the first country that has done that. As I said, though, I really don't want to go into the medical side of it, because I'm not a trained doctor, and I'm pretty sure that there would be somebody from the New Zealand Doctors Speak Out for Science who would be really happy to jump on with their professional opinion about the medical side of that, which we can get in touch with them, because I don't want it to be about the medical stuff, because I think personally I want to go back to the fact that it is an infringement of our human rights, it totally goes against our Bill of Rights. Yeah.
And let's do that now. But as I just said about information, I want to make sure we're fair and accurate. Taiwan has temporarily stopped administering the second dose in 12 to 17-year-olds. So they haven't put a stop to the vaccine. They haven't put a stop on it like you just said. They've temporarily stopped it between 12 and 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
In 12 to 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
Right. But not the rest of the country, but not everyone else.
No. But it's interesting that some countries are starting to look at that and wonder, and you have to sit there and maybe take some notice of that. Yeah. I just think that we need to be paying attention to studies and data from overseas. These guys, we have not had COVID in here for very long. I mean, we've hardly had any cases. Like comparatively for the rest of the world, we have not had a lot of cases. So we should be looking, and our governments and scientists, we should be looking at what's happening overseas and what they are finding, because they have been there and done that. They have experienced with it. And so, yeah, I just think that we need to be looking a little bit closer at some of the other studies that are coming out.
So two very quick points. The first is the 12 to 17-year-olds. The reason they've stopped that, and they did in another country, I'm not sure what it was because of myocarditis, the inflammation of the heart, right? But they've done that because it's happened. It sounds really serious and it sounds horrific because it's an inflammation of the heart, but it's not. It's resulted in the death of one person in New Zealand, I think. One person. Steroids normally fix it up, and the other thing is the research that's come out recently says patients with COVID-19 have a 16 times higher risk of myocarditis compared to patients who don't have COVID-19. So actually getting COVID-19, you're at higher risk by 16 times to get that than not having COVID-19. So if the vaccine protects, and I know you're going to you maybe not agree with that, but if it does, then the research seems to show that the myocarditis is, you're less likely to get it with the vaccine than than if you get COVID. So
yeah. But just jumping on with something that you just said, is the vaccine should be protecting, and so you can always take it back to the fact that if the vaccine is so good at protecting, then why are people worried about us that are not actually getting the vaccine? Because if you are taking the vaccine, then surely you have some form of protection.
Sure.
When it comes to that. So we could argue that. As I said, I would potentially like to go back to my reasons rather than the whole medical stuff.
Yeah, and I agree with you. But then again, every time we kind of say that, you say one little other thing that I want to respond to. One more. So, and I mean, my response to that is because we need 90% for herd immunity. Maybe once we hit 90%, maybe the unvaccinated maybe the government will make a change. I don't know. Maybe this is a drive to get to 90%, because that's what they say for herd immunity. Obviously, when you have the vaccine, you can still get COVID. I was going to ask you one other question, and it's not about medical stuff, because you said we're a country that has a very small amount, very little COVID. Why do you think that is?
Probably because we had a zero tolerance policy, which actually is a little bit unrealistic, I think, in the face of some of the variants that we are getting. But again, we're going into the medical science.
No. I don't think we need to go into the medical side, because I think you're right. Because of the zero tolerance. So that means because of the government, we have a very small amount of COVID in the country, because they are the ones who put out the zero tolerance. And obviously under Delta, zero tolerance.
But then in saying that, we also have a huge amount of an increase in deaths from suicide. You mentioned that at the start there. We have an increase.
Hey, that's not accurate. That's absolutely not accurate. Suicide numbers have gone down in the last 12 months. Like the research shows, that Stats New Zealand shows, suicide numbers have gone down. I know that for a fact because I have researched that one, and I think it's really just a dangerous thing to say suicide numbers have gone up when over the last 12 months. I don't have it at the hand, I can get it, but have actually gone down in the last 12 months.
Okay. And we
I will show you that. I will show you that if you want to challenge that. That's fine.
That sounds good. Yeah, no, some of the stuff that we're getting, I mean, just some of the other impacts that we've got are major. Like we've got major anxiety, we've got job closures, we've got businesses that have gone out of business. We've got people who are really hurting from this. A lot of people who are very much hurting from the lockdowns. And again, this conversation isn't about the lockdowns. It's the reason of why I'm choosing not to get this particular jab, and I will be probably losing my job on Monday night.
So I haven't got I mean, we can get the direct link to Stats New Zealand, but here's the numbers. On the 10th month of this year, New Zealand suicide rate drops for the second consecutive year. Is that enough evidence?
I don't know. I think I need to look at some of the stuff that Mike King has been saying, which is quite a different take. I think recently he's been saying there's, I'll have to go back to those articles.
Okay. I just want to ask you this one thing still about this, why we've got such a small amount of COVID in the country at the moment. It's not to do with the medical side of things, and we're not going to talk about that right now. But I'm all for free speech and criticizing where criticism is due. But surely you have to be congratulatory of the government in the let's say first 12 months of this, because it's because of what they implemented that gave us that 12 months of freedom when the rest of the world didn't have it. I mean, so Delta may come in, you may be very critical of that, but prior to that coming in, because there was no talk prior to that coming in about passports or about dividing the nation into two, vaccinated, unvaccinated. Surely you have to give some credit to, and I'm not going to say Jacinda, because I don't accept that it's about Jacinda. There is a full team that makes these decisions, and she doesn't make it by herself, but to the government team that kept us to that zero COVID for such a long time. Do you have any thoughts of congratulations about that, or any positive thoughts for that period?
Probably no comment of that at the moment, because it's not really relevant to no comment on that.
Well, it is relevant. It's relevant when we criticize that, yet not everything's always 100% bad. Like it's like some things are good, some things are bad. Like I've been saying since day one, I think our COVID management in New Zealand has been a mixture up until let's draw a line in the sand with Delta, has been a mixture of good management and good luck. Like we were good luck that we didn't get through the border sooner because we didn't have proper testing and stuff there. So I'm not saying that the government that we have was like perfect in this. There was some good luck there as well, but I still think it's okay to say that because of what they implemented, I mean, the rest of us were able to go to All Blacks test matches or Auckland rugby games or New Zealand cricket because it was out of the country for such a long time. You don't think you've got nothing to say to that?
Not really, because it's not really what I to talk about. So I'll just wait until we move on to that. So
let's move on. So tell me about the reasons for you not, I guess it's not wanting to get vaccinated. Is that fair?
Okay, so I think that there actually are a lot of people like me in this position where I don't think that you guys realize how many there are. I've fielded a whole bunch of calls of people in the same position and people in worse positions where they feel that they have no choice. To me, a government should not be pushing their mandates on somebody, because when you look at the Bill of Rights, it says that we should not be subjected to medical experimentation against our will. And some people might sit there and say, oh, but it's not against your will. You're either taking it or you take your job. Well, actually, when it comes down to livelihood, it makes it very difficult for people to actually say no, and that is not fair. What they're doing is going against our human rights. We don't want to be injected with this stuff. We want to be able to decide what we want to put into our own body, and for a government to dictate to us, it's just wrong.
So let's have a look at the Bill of Rights to start off with, because there is a provision in the Bill of Rights, and I'd be interested because I don't know exactly what the judge said or the result was on Friday, but my understanding is Bill of Rights Act 1990, and I do have it here. That is it, Section 5 that talks about justified limitations, and yes, it does say no one will be forced into a medical procedure, which technically no one is. I understand we might be drawing a long bow there because you say if you're taking away my income, I feel like I'm being forced into it. But there is also justified limitations in the Bill of Rights. Is that what came up in your court case? Because that speaks to me that they sort of the rights can be overridden if it's justified. For example, when a pandemic comes in for the national health of the country.
Well, see, I would think actually that in a pandemic or in any situation that actually we do need to adhere to the laws of the land, and we need to actually follow what has already been decided and what is law. Just because an emergency thing has come in and said that we must actually do this, it's a really slippery slope. It's where you're taking away the rights of an individual, and that I don't think that there's any justification in that.
Well, let's nail that down. What right are being taken away?
The right to choose what to put into people's bodies.
But you
the
can.
Right to choose whether or not to take an experimental vaccine.
But everyone has that choice right now.
Yeah, but is it really a choice? Because you see, the one thing that happens is when I'm at school, I'm surrounded by children, and children like to do things like bullying and coercion. And I'm seeing that from our government, where they are bullying and making people do things that they do not want to do. I do not think that people are having a choice, because when it comes to livelihoods and trying to survive, especially for mortgages and feeding of children, this is a really fine line. If you start punishing people by not actually going towards what you want them to do, how is this a free society? This is where we're heading into fascism, where we have rights taken away from us. It's literally, it's literally where our rights have been taken away.
Well, I guess I'm going to ask the same question again, because I feel like, look, I don't want to sound flippant, because I understand that putting something into your body is different from the example I'm going to give. But I've mentioned this example before, and I'll mention it again. I know people who had young families, who left Auckland, left their support group, left their family, left their friends, moved to a different part of the country for the reason that they wanted to buy a house. Now, they had to make a hard choice, an unbelievably hard choice, to do that, but it still wasn't forced on them. Some people might say I was forced to leave Auckland because I couldn't afford housing. Now, ultimately, these young families made a very hard decision to leave Auckland because they wanted to buy a house. They wanted to own property, so they left Auckland. I know, as I've already stated, and I know it's different because it's putting something into your body versus that, but if you just look at the black and white of this, and maybe that's unfair, this is still a choice. Surely you would concede it's still a choice. You're making, because if it wasn't a choice, you couldn't do the opposite. You could choose to have this injection tomorrow, but you're choosing not to. That means by definition, it's a choice, isn't it?
No, it's not.
But you could do the opposite.
In some cases, especially from people who love their jobs and they want to be there for their students, and this is a hard choice. I've hit a lot of teachers all us teachers who do want to be with our students desperately and do want to teach our students, and they've literally said, you have a choice to either do this or you lose everything. And for many, even if they do not agree with this, they will cave and they will go and get it done, even if they do not agree with the way that this has been done. I do not see that as a freedom of choice. I see that as coercion and bullying. And this is actually something that we tell our students that we shouldn't see happening. We should be standing up and saying, this is not okay. I'm absolutely devastated that my teaching profession, that so many of us are potentially going to have no jobs as of Monday night. There are so many people I've talked to who literally have health concerns, and they're worried about the potential for this vaccine on their body. And then any medical exemption was ripped away by the government because they just said, no, this is not going to happen.
No, let's be fair, not any medical exemption. There are medical exemptions available, but maybe not to the level.
Very limited though.
Yeah, but not any. Can't say any. Just being fair and accurate.
Very little. Okay, if you like. I have the issue that still it's coercion, regardless of your stance of whether you agree or disagree. This is still bullying by our government. You cannot say and define this as not bullying.
Let me ask you something. When are you getting your injection?
I won't be.
Why not?
Because I think it's going to be too dangerous.
Yeah, you're choosing not to.
I'm not choosing to do. I'm having to give up a lot of what I love for.
I agree. No, look, I agree. No, you don't need to sell me on how difficult the choice is, but the answer to the question, why aren't you getting it, is because you're choosing not to. That's accurate. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So you're making a choice. So we all have a choice.
Under duress. Yeah, but it's a choice under duress.
I look, and I understand what you're saying, but ultimately it is still a choice. Look, I'm not trying to, genuinely not trying to kind of get into a conflict or beat up on you here. I really want to understand, because it doesn't seem to me to be something that, I understand if people want to stand by if some people have a moral issue or they have a religious issue for it, but when it comes down to yes or no, if you can sit here, or let's say we catch up in a week, and I hope you're not, worse off financially. And I don't want to see that for anybody, but if you are, that's because you've chosen not to get a injection. And for people who make that choice to get it, then they've chosen to. There was some research coming out of the US where the Republicans in particular were espousing that all the New York police officers were going to walk off the job, because none of them wanted to get it. 35,000 officers in New York. And they said thousands and thousands of police officers are going to leave. In the end, 34 of them did, because the rest of them made a choice that they'd rather keep their job, that they'd rather get a vaccine, be protected. For whatever reason, at the end, they still made that choice.
Well, I really hope that someday, when you potentially are having more and more of your freedoms taken away, and you look back and you go, actually, was it a choice or was it a right of freedom? That you look back and you think, yeah, maybe I did have a choice. Maybe you did have a choice to maybe question what we are doing in New Zealand currently. I think, regardless, I think what we are doing is abhorrent. I think that we're heading down a really slippery slope. And we're going to be losing a lot of really good teachers, doctors, midwives, a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life who are making that choice to do this. And when some of the kids or some of the people turn around and say, well, it was their fault for leaving, well, we'll go back to the fact that, yes, we made a choice not to put this into our body because we went and looked at things and we thought about it and we wanted to have autonomy over our own bodies rather than a government dictating to us what we want to do.
What about all the other things that the government dictates to us to do that we have to stand by and we do? For example, let's pick a flippant one, wearing a seatbelt. I might want to go back to that, don't we? Well, yeah, I mean, I know it's flippant because again, it's not inject. But then again, well, let's go to vaccines. There are some, what do they call them, where the 2 to 5 year olds go? Kindies, where the kids have to be vaccinated to attend those kindies. So it's not an unheard of situation that people have to choose to vaccinate or get their kids vaccinated to participate in a part of society. I guess what I'd like to be able to understand is why this, like, are you vaccinated at all? Like when you were a kid, did you get vaccinated? Have you had flu shots vaccinated, that kind of thing as well?
I've had some vaccines, yes, but I
Yeah.
haven't had the flu shots, and no, I will not be getting this one. Can I just bring up for
Sure.
my own self, and I don't want to bring up my own situation per se, because there are other people out there who are going to walk off this job for their reasons, which I think are probably more justified, such as the freedom to do and choose what they want to put in their body. But one thing that is, you talked about how the exemptions were actually available for people. And it's really interesting because I went to my doctor with a study, a peer-reviewed study about my particular blood disorder. You can look it up, antiphospholipid syndrome, where it talks about the potential side effects is going to increase substantially by taking the COVID vaccine, where I potentially will end up with much more risk than the average person. And even with this data to my doctor, he turned around and refused me to even look at giving me an exemption, even though it was a study that has been done. And there are other people in the same situation. I've had people come to me who have said that they have major anaphylactic shock. They have literally, every time they have anaphylaxis, it becomes worse and worse each time. They went to their doctor and they said, I need to get an exemption. And the doctor's reply was, that's fine. We'll have a crash card available for you when you end up kind of like, it's fine. We'll just bring you back. It's okay. How is that do no harm for an individual? I personally think that as an adult, I should have the decision of what I should do with my own body and calculate my own risks. I personally do not think that a doctor should just go, nah, she'll be right, you're fine, even after looking at some of these studies. And other people, I think, also should be able to calculate those risks. Because you know what? If I do not calculate those risks, if I sit there and I get this vaccine and I end up throwing a blood clot to the brain and have a stroke, or I have multiple blood clots to the heart, or wherever else that I potentially could get these blood clots, because it's not going to be obvious straight away, it's going to hit me wherever it's going to hit in my body, then I don't want to have to look back on that and go, oh, yeah, I should have listened to the doctor, because the doctor is always right. He always has my best interests at heart, because I think that message is actually getting lost these days because of the mandate that our government is sending out, where they're saying, sorry, nobody gets an exemption. Or sorry, limited people get an exemption. And even then it's a very, very small amount of time, and you're going to have to reapply for it after a very, very small matter of time. I'm horrified that I cannot calculate my own risks. I'm horrified that I can't look at my own medical data and have somebody tell me that I have to go and inject this into my body. Good luck. Sorry, my job is not actually worth my life.
And I guess that's the decision you will make. It's the difficulty is you've just started talking medical things again, and we weren't going to talk about medical things. But I get it. I understand it. I understand what you're saying. And forgive me if you saw me smirk when you were talking there, because you mentioned the condition you have, and you said you can look it up yourself. I smirked because I was there. I don't know fucking how to spell that. How am I supposed to look that up? I can't even spell that. But I'd like to.
I can send you via a link the actual study that was done if you would like.
Look, I mean, I'd happily read it. I don't think we're going to bring it up in here, because I mean, my reaction, my response to that would have been, if we were having this in a cup of coffee in town, I'd be saying, well, go to another doctor. Go up the food chain if this is genuine. Because and I guess it's the same from what I'm saying to you. It's the same as what you're saying to me. Is when we say research is showing, the obvious response is, what research, what peer review, what is it? Is it viable? Is it valid? So I get that. We can't go too deep into that, because we can't, drill down into every single bit of research that both of us have looked at and got. But I did want to come back to you about the risk factor as well. Because I read something the other day that used an analogy of freedom to do things to ourselves and to our have autonomy over our actions and stuff, but when they impact on other people. What do you think about when you, not you, because it doesn't have to be personal, but I'm sure you'll talk to people about this. When people talk about, I want to be safe and protected by not getting vaccinated, but if that does cause others around you to be less safe, like
again, we kind of go back to we go back to that you're vaccinated, and so you're walking around with this imaginary seatbelt around you where you are free and safe from actually getting the COVID, is what you've been told. So that's why you went in.
But no one's been told that. We've been told that it's reduced. The chances of getting COVID are reduced. And certainly the chances of hospitalization are reduced if you get it. I think, and I'm not saying you're saying this, so let me be careful with that. But sometimes I've been hearing people saying, "But you're protected. You've got the." It's like when people use a condom. There's no such thing as safe sex. It's safer sex, right? You can still get someone pregnant. You can still catch an STD, but it's safer. The COVID vaccine, to me, any vaccine is the same. It's safer. It's not safe. Full stop. Which means if I'm around unvaccinated people who are more likely to have it, and I'm not 100% protected, then they're more of a I'm at more risk. I'm safer because I've got the vaccine, but I'm still at more risk from people with COVID who are around me. And if you're unvaccinated, you're more likely to have COVID.
See, that's really interesting, because again, there is data out there that actually completely disputes what you've just said with the whole we're more likely to be spreading this. So I'm not going to dispute the data. I've given you my reasons for why I'm doing what I'm doing and why people are potentially not getting this vaccine. I'm going to sign off now because it's been a interesting talk, and we're going to leave it at that. So we will talk to you later.
All right. Can we say who was in the room with you? Should we say goodbye and thanks to them as well?
Just a friend.
All right. Hey, well, look, I do genuinely thank you. Oh, okay. And she's gone. All right. There you go, guys. That's us done. Look, maybe what I could do now that I'm here all by my lonesome is have a look at some of these comments that have been coming in thick and fast. I apologize. Well, I don't apologize because there was too much stuff going on, but there was a lot of commentary going on in there as well. Rachel has left us. I'm not quite sure why right at the very end was the need to cut out that quickly. I don't know if Rachel's still watching, but if she is, a genuine thanks for coming on. I think it's important to try and understand why people are kind of thinking and believing what they're believing. And I think to have strong opinions as to why you're making a strong stance, if there's some pushback, then maybe you should have the ability or the understanding to put your thoughts out there. What shall I do? Oh, look, maybe I won't. I had a whole bunch of information here lined up. I'm going to do this. If people are still watching, it never came up in the conversation, but I did have a little video here in case anyone wanted to watch. Do you know what people are talking about an experimental vaccine? Let's all learn together. What is an mRNA? I think that would be useful in case you don't know.
Hi, my name is Paul Offer from the Vaccine Education Center. We've entered a new realm of vaccines, the so-called genetic vaccines, where you give people not a RNA isn't DNA and would need to be translated or reverse transcribed back to DNA. And because it can't be integrated into DNA, it is not possible for messenger RNA to alter DNA. The chance of that happening is not small, it's zero. It is not possible. Thank you.
Well, there you go. I just had some feedback from someone that you weren't getting the sound there. I'm not quite entirely sure what happened there, but I apologize about that. But just by chance, it happened to be subtitled as well. Look, I am gonna add one other thing. I was saying,
Hi everyone.
I asked
and
Rachel
welcome back
on
to my
genuinely because I wanted to find out. There's a whole bunch of comments about rage quitting and stuff, and the thing I'm not gonna put any of those on there. But I think I see what happened. I turned my mic off, and maybe me turning my mic off. Plainer Walk, you're saying that the sound came back. Did it come back like in the last 10 seconds? Because if that's the case, then it was when I turned my mic back on. That was weird. Why would me muting my mic turn that off? I'm not going to put those all. I'm sorry, guys, for that. But you can go and find that if you want to watch it for yourself, and hopefully you read along. Now, look, I want to say I am going to say one thing. I had some stuff prepared in case it came up, and I'm going to share something about the NZDSOS, which I wasn't definitely going to share, but because I'm here by myself talking to you guys now, I'm going to do it. The NZDSOS is a group of doctors who have shared some concerns about COVID-19. Right? There was several of them watching along, and they're the people that Rachel suggested we could get along to have a talk to about this. Now, I read an article about them on stuff.co.nz. Stuff.co.nz talks about these doctors who are trying to hijack New Zealand's COVID-19 rollout. And if you have a look at the doctors that are listed down here, there are 16 of them. You see that? 16. I'm getting to the bottom here. There we go. So the doctors that are currently practicing certificates who are signed onto the NZDSOS, there are 16 names there, right? Now, if you go to the actual letter that was signed, there was, I think, 32 names on this letter. And I thought to myself, that's a bit peculiar. How are there, and there looks like some have been redacted. I'm not sure why, but they've been redacted. It's peculiar that there were 32 names on this letter as to why there was concerns around the Pfizer. Yet there were 16 identified by staff. So what I did was I went onto the register of doctors just out of interest to see who these people were and what their areas of specialty are. Now, I have no beef in this, and I have no beef with any of these people, but just out of interest, I looked up the name Anna Goodwin. See, Anna Goodwin there has a registration number. So you go to the registration and you look up Goodwin and you go show doctors, all of New Zealand, all types of medicine, all statuses, and I look for Anna Goodwin. There is an Alison Goodwin, a Bernadette Goodwin, an Ian Goodwin, a Michael Goodwin, a Rachel Goodwin, a Rebecca Goodwin, a Samuel Goodwin, a Sarah Goodwin, and that's it. So I phoned, this is not for this is for something else I was working out. I phoned the register of doctors, and they were confused as well as to how someone could be identifying themselves as a doctor, yet not be on the register of doctors. Now, I haven't done a full and exclusive list. Maybe if there are some people out there who have more time than me, why don't you feel free to go through all those names on the NZDSOS who are claiming that they've got medical council registration and medical council numbers, and go and see how many of them actually, and I'll say don't appear to be, in case I've made a mistake, but don't appear to be on the registration or the registrar of doctors. Just a thought. All right, guys. Hey, listen, if you're still with us, thanks for being with us. I do think that it's tough. It's a tough decision some people are making. Personally, I'm okay in general with the mandate, and saying that, as I said at the very start of the live stream, there is a question at least to be had that if you can have 30 students in a classroom that aren't vaccinated, what is the essential item to have a teacher who is vaccinated? I think that's a valid question. And saying that I'm still okay with the mandate. When I say okay, I'm not trying to be flippant, because there are people making decisions that are going to cause their lives to be really hard and difficult after that. But yeah, I look, I think that this conversation will go on. All I can say is get us to 90%, please. I'd like to have a summer. I'd like to be able to travel and move around. And yeah, if we can, that would be amazing. And I think you should all get vaccinated. I have to say that I think there isn't any research out there that I've seen, and I've been neck deep in this for a long time, that gives me concern about people being vaccinated. Now, that's not to say that vaccinations don't come with risks. All of you who are parents, I'm a parent. We got told by our midwife when we had kids, you know, there can be side effects from this. There can be issues that go along with it. You do take a risk with taking a vaccine. But I think what's been proven, like I talked about the myocarditis, sorry, my dyslexia has just kicked in, is you're far more at risk of getting that heart inflammation if you catch COVID than what's been cited with getting the vaccine. That's what the research shows pretty clearly. I'm always happy to read and see research. I mean, if you're someone who is not in the same camp as me, you can see scrolling down the bottom, youtube.com/DOCNZ Studios. Also all my personal follows you can do on Instagram and Twitter at Pat Brittenden. And also for the other stuff we do, Elephant TV and Department of Conversation, they've got Facebook pages and ways to connect with us as well. Now, on that note, if you are still watching, all of you, thank you for joining us. We do another product. It's called Elephant TV. Coming up this week on Elephant TV, Wednesday night, we've got a debate between an op-ed writer for Redline, which is kind of a Marxist magazine, and the chief commissioner for the Human Rights Commission. And we are going to be doing a debate on Wednesday night on are hate speech laws necessary? It's based around the Royal Commission making suggestions that we should make changes to our hate speech laws. But that's what we're going to be doing on Wednesday night. So on Wednesday night, come and join us to see a live stream debate, which will be on demand afterwards. You'll be able to pick up on it. And other than that, it's been, I don't want to say fun. I'm not trying to make this sound flippant. But it's been an interesting evening. I mean, let's just put a few of this up, seeing we're here. What does Kenny Nacker say? I'd rather not. As a West Australian, we have zero community COVID, and we're with everywhere had the same. That's right, and Wish everywhere had the same. Crumbs, I just did something to my system. Matt says, what does Matt say? I think it's being overseas, being wide open, and show that transmission from kids to teachers and vice versa is rare. Planar Walk says, I would like to live in a world without a plague. Yeah, I agree with you. And so the dialogue body language says, I've been paid off by Pfizer. Fuck, I wish. Dude, I could do with a few extra dollars. I could do with a few extra dollars. And yes, there's all the people telling me that I muted the person. I do apologize about that. All right, guys, I think we're done. Hey, thank you for joining us. Go to my personal, my personals there. Go and subscribe to DOCNZ Studios. If you subscribe at DOCNZ Studios on YouTube, then you'll get notified of the debate coming up this week. And it's a proper debate. We've got the head commissioner for the Human Rights Commission, and we've also got a veteran left-wing activist taking opposite sides on the hate speech. Also, before Christmas, we're going to be doing one on the birth certificate legislative change, that people can self-identify their sex on their birth certificate. Just setting that up at the moment, and that'll be hopefully happening before Christmas. I probably should have. I've left this up there for a long time. Maybe I should just leave it up there now as we toddle off. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you joining us, and I do appreciate Rachel joining us as well. Hopefully, she got something out of it. She certainly got a chance to share her thoughts, and hopefully, we learned a bit more. Maybe we did. Maybe we didn't. All right, team. All the best. Catch you. Bye. See you.